his father, like
Yes,
about
that's
how
right.
he's not feeling super confident in himself, how he feels like he wants to kind of run away
Mm-hmm.
and not face up to what he has to do. But at the same time, like in the end, his resolve is that he wants to help people. He cares about the kids and he cares about people. And he wants to do what's best for the people of his country. And like he's dedicated to that first. He's committed to that first. And so I think it's in tandem. It's that conversation he has with Faye, and also just the cruelty of the Gebler, their attitude toward lands.
Yeah.
Right. That sort of like pulls Faye out of this resistance, and he decides to, okay, I'm going to help you guys.
Yeah.
Right. But these Gebler pilots, right, who come in,
they're kind of funny at first.
They are,
a
and
little clumsy.
this is, I don't know how many more times I'm going to say these names are references to this or that or this or that. When they aren't like in particular like a purposeful thematic reference.
Mm-hmm.
When it's just like, oh, this is a name because he's a physicist who, or maybe a psychoanalyst who was like a colleague of Freud or something.
Sure.
But beyond that, the character doesn't exhibit any, because these Gebler pilots are named after physicists and psychoanalysts and stuff.
Yeah.
But but it's just a name. It's just kind of an arbitrary reference.
It seems like names are kind of like that within this thing.
Like the Hebrew months being the names of cities.
Yeah.
It's just because they sound cool.
Yeah.
And he was like reading, a lot of like Jewish mysticism at the time.
Mm-hmm.
It's not because like there's some explicit tie, to the religion somehow.
Right.
So I don't know how many more times I will do this, but I do want to mention that these names, now the way that they were translated, it changed the spelling, and I'm guessing that's because he's just trying to follow the phonetics of it.
Sure.
So like Breuer should be spelled Breuer, which is the name of Joseph Breuer, who was the mentor of Sigmund Freud.
Okay.
But the way that was written in English was Broyer.
Right. Yeah.
So a lot of these names would be hard to directly understand. That's a reference to this.
Okay, right. Because they were spelled wrong. Yeah.
Right, because they're not spelled correct. But so you have Breuer, who is Joseph Breuer, like I said, the mentor of Freud. Then you have Helmholtz, who should be Hermann von Helmholtz, with a T, is a German physicist and physician who he did like a lot of research on like the eye, like human vision, and like visual perception and stuff like that. He added a lot to those fields. So that's who Helmholtz is a reference to. Then you have Rank, R-E-N-K in English, who should be R-A-N-K, after Otto Rank, who is an Austrian psychoanalyst and is a close colleague of Freud. Then you have, let's see here, Rank, and then there's Vance, who should have been Franz. Again, Japanese,
right,
trying to pronounce the name, but like then being translated back into English is tough, and some of that pronunciation is not quite carrying over exactly.
Well, the city we're about to go to, I know, is pronounced very differently in Japanese.
Yeah, Gledevik.
Yeah, but it's Glederidovic or something. I'll read it.
France is based on François Fanon, who was a French West Indian psychiatrist and a political radical, really like a Marxist humanist. Who, anyways, very influential. A lot of things that he's written in like people who were very politically active and stuff like that. So these were, and also Stratsky is the last guy on the team of Gebler that are like breaking into this place. What's most likely meant to be Stransky, and there's like a number of possible physicists named Stransky who this could be referencing. So
yeah, the way it's pronounced in Japanese is Sutoraki.
Yeah, but
it's hard to know.
It's
really trying to reference. It's really hard.
But it's probably supposed to be Stransky because there's a lot of physicists. They all are, similarly named to other physicists and psychologists. But beyond that, I don't know what connection there is. Anyways, you guys break in, and they're coming in there after the gears, and so the alarms go off. Bart and Sigurd and Seitan are rushing down to get started. fighting these guys off. And so Faye comes down into the hangar, and Saikan rushes up and he says, "Aren't you going to do anything? Do you still think it has nothing to do with you?" He's still really pushing him. "Come on, Faye, get in here and fight." He will not let up on it, man.
Yeah.
Saikan will not give it a rest. And Faye just turns it back. He doesn't even say anything. So Saikan from there just kind of pauses, and then he just rushes down, and he's going to fight.
Yes, and he's like, "I'll do it myself."
And he's like, I'll go fight. Like,
Which
I really like.
I was wondering what I was going to see when he was like, "I'll do it," because I didn't know how this was going to look.
Oh, sure.
Right, I didn't know that he's capable of
Of
doing what he does in a mech. Right?
And then I really like Faye's lines as he left. He starts to question himself, like, what am I? That old man, he called me the slayer of God.
Right.
I don't want that kind of power. He's just so scared of losing control. Right?
Yeah, I just wonder about Faye's disposition. His would you call it? See, because this world's different. God is a physical thing that exists in the physical space that can be shown to exist.
Yeah.
So my question of does Faye believe in God is not the right question for this world. This world operates differently from our world, as far as I am aware. But it could be that even though people around him are dying, the idea of killing God is worse than than people dying around him, right? Like, yeah, you're dying, but if I fight to defend you, I'm gonna end up killing God, and that's probably worse, or something like that. Or if he even thinks that God is a benevolent force, or maybe I don't know what his ideas are towards God. They don't really clue us into that, but he's hesitant to kill God.
Yeah.
And it could be something like that. Because it's one thing to be like, oh, killing God, that's heavy, that's too heavy, that weighs on my soul. But it's another thing to be like, I believe in God, and that doesn't make sense that I would want to kill him, right, as a benevolent force.
Sure.
We're not clued in here, but I'm very curious as to whether or not that plays into kind of his thinking, right?
Yeah.
Why he would not fight and help people, despite the fact that he can, because of the threat that if he keeps helping people, he's going to end up killing God. And I think in his mind, he sees that as being worse.
Yeah, and this was something that was brought up in an early episode, that there didn't seem to be any reference anywhere in all of the hand to a religion. So Faye,
No, that's
what
right.
you're talking about?
Lahan, yeah.
His whole life has been these 3 years in Lahan.
Right. And there isn't like a church there.
There's no
right?
church,
There's no
there's
discipline.
any religion at all.
Mhm.
So what does he even feel about God?
What does he know about it?
Yeah. And
Yeah,
maybe it's just the idea of having enough power to kill God
That's
is too much power for me. I don't even want to mess with it.
right.
Because if I could kill God, I could kill anybody.
Oh, totally.
Right?
Yeah.
And if I can kill anybody, and if I lose control,
Then what's to stop him doing it?
killing everybody.
Right.
Maybe that's kind of where his line of thinking is.
Sure. It's just it's hard to read, especially in a situation like this, because when they were escaping from the ship that was sinking in before we met with Bart, we jumped right into that thing because we were like, oh dang, people are attacking us. We gotta get in the fight. He just climbs the crane and just goes down the rope and drops right in. But he's fighting it more here, even though that part was after Graf as well. It's almost as if.
But it was before baptism.
You're right. It was before the kill God.
Before he was told.
You're right. So that one line is kind of ringing his
Really
head,
bothering.
and that's why he's been so quiet.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
So, we get uncovered to Saipan as he goes to a gear that is described by Mason as being nowhere near operational. And he jumps into it anyways, and he's like, wait a minute, no, we can't do it. And Sigurd's like, no, he'll be just fine. Don't worry about it.
I said it may not even be enough. I don't know exactly what that means.
I think it means like, he's so good that even like a non-operational gear, like, or actually you're right. It is kind of hard to parse what he means by that.
I looked it up in Japanese. It
Okay.
says the same thing, like sufficient. It may not be sufficient. It may not be enough for what he's capable of. It's not.
I think
it doesn't rise to his level.
I guess the way I interpreted that was the gear is really powerful.
So it's hard to control.
It's hard to control.
Right.
And it's not operational right now.
Yeah.
So it's like this really really powerful gear that is also not operational, which is also a difficult thing to handle.
Yeah.
And no, please don't get that's dangerous. And Sigurd's like, yeah, no problem.
Yeah. Meaning, so it may not even be, no, it may be even,
It may even
I
not
think
be-
what they're saying, it could be even less operational and would still be able to use it.
Sure,
I
yes.
think, that's kind of the way I took it as well, yeah.
Sure.
The Japanese is the same though, that
Yeah.
line is perfectly translated, so.
Yeah. So then Saiken gets in it and he says, well, it's been 5 years since I last fought. I hope I can still remember.
And isn't that weird that the first line we get about him and his past is him alone talking to himself?
Yeah.
He won't tell anyone
Anybody
anything,
about
but
himself.
he finally tells us, and it's to himself. It's just a thought he has to himself. But he was a warrior 5 years ago. That is very. This is the first thing we know about his past, and that he fought someone. Now that doesn't make him good or bad. It's just you start to kind of put some pieces together.
He was a gear pilot to some degree.
You know?
And he does say later, I'm a little bit rusty, and there are certain limitations because I didn't start early enough. So he's like mentioning I wasn't trained from a young enough age to be like a master pilot of a gear or something.
Okay.
But still, I'm pretty good at these guys are going down.
Yeah.
But anyways, what were you gonna say?
No, that was it.
Okay. So yeah, but he's referencing it almost like it's riding a bike or something.
Yeah.
Hopefully you can just pick it up and ride a bike again.
Right,
It's
check
a
muscle
muscle
memory, yeah.
But then he faces up against one of the Gebler pilots who is coming and attacking. He says, compared to the pain my friends are going through, yours is nothing. I cannot allow you to persist in tormenting those who cannot fight back. I will take you one more place. Come on.
Right, because all these guys are like, ooh, children. Loaded guns. Let's kill the children, everybody.
Right.
And it's like pretty heavy-handed.
It's a little heavy-handed, but I think it's also just an indication of how little they regard the lives of lambs.
Right, that's true.
They just don't care about lambs at all. Like lambs are fodder. And Graf talked about them this way. Ellie talked about them this way. We'll see a little bit of it from Ramses in a minute. I can't know of. They don't consider them on the same level. They're almost like animals to them, right? So they just don't care about killing kids.
Yeah.
And so, anyways, I like that line because in this sort of second look at the game, I was noticing some of the more overt or maybe heavy-handed foreshadowing around Saikan and feeling more suspicious of him this playthrough. But this line, I think,
That was a
it puts
solidly
some more
good
doubt.
line.
It puts some more doubt into, does he have ulterior motives that are bad?
Right, it makes you think, well, he has ulterior motives, but he's a good guy. So we'll
still
trust
a
him.
good person.
Yeah, we don't know what he's doing, but he's a good guy.
Exactly. And so it brings more nuance into the character in a way that I really like.
And once again, it's him talking to himself. And people are honest when they talk to themselves. Like, if he said that to someone, it's like, oh, he's putting on a face or something. But he's talking to himself, and so you can believe it.
Yeah. And so then they're fighting, and then he notices that line I mentioned earlier. I'm a little rusty, and I didn't start early enough, but I'm still hitting hard and not going down. I wonder if they're using that stuff. He said.
Drive,
Yeah.
right?
And then he's like, turns to the young one, they're using drive. They're battle enhancement drugs. Normal attacks will not hurt them.
So I have questions about this.
Yeah. I mean,
Is it a drug for the robot?
for the person,
It's a drug for the person.
the person so piloting the robot. So I assume that this is kind of like many mecha anime or kind of gaijin. Is that what it's called?
No, gaijin means foreigner. So you mean the kaiju.
The kaiju movies where they battle them with robots, but they feel the pain of the robots. And when the robot gets punched, they get hurt too.
So it's not that the robot breaks, it's that they break.
Yes, because it's kind of a trope of that genre, right? Where it's like you're connected to the robot.
Yeah.
And when
That
the
makes
robot
sense.
gets stabbed, you bleed too.
You get hurt.
So I guess
but-
that drive helps them to not feel the pain of the impacts when the robots are
I mean, that makes sense. That's a good example. My thinking is, because every now and then, especially early on when we first got this gear, the Velto, we it would break down on us. Like, oh no, the knee joints need tuning up, and oh no, this thing, oh, we were able to kill the dinosaur, but oh man, the thing sustained some damage, right? When you mention that the people are on drugs, it makes it seem like their machines are just invincible and all it's about is hurting the person. But we've seen many times that these machines, you break the machine, and then it doesn't matter if the person's fine or not, the machine's broken, it can't work anymore. So I'm not seeing that distinction much here. They're making it seem like the machines will do what they do, and you gotta hurt the person, and you can't, oh no, we can't hurt the person, and the machines are too tight to break.
Yeah, it is a little confusing, and now that I think about it, if it is the case that the pilot is like feeling the pain that the gear is experiencing in terms of damage, like why wasn't Faye's knee broken when the Veltal's knee
After
got damaged? You know, so maybe it's not
Faye
maybe
seems
it's
okay.
it's the gear itself that is faking drive or the drug, and it like makes it so that the gear doesn't get damaged.
That would make sense, and there's another thing in the Japanese that doesn't always, usually doesn't specify the he, she, or it.
Yeah.
They'll just say, and I should have looked this up earlier, but they'll just say, drive, like something along the lines of drive is being used.
Yeah.
They won't necessarily say, oh, the people are using drive. So it's for the people, not for the
not for the
giants.
Yeah. And essentially, it basically only enhances their senses to the height of that human's own potential.
Oh, okay. So you use 100% of your brain instead of 10%?
Yes.
It probably pumps adrenaline like crazy, because adrenaline makes it so you don't feel the pain in your muscles as much. So your muscles tear, but you can do more stuff,
That's
right?
probably a good explanation.
But it doesn't explain why the gears don't sustain damage themselves. That is probably my biggest issue with the way drive works. But to the extent that we understand how they're using it, I'll look past that for now.
So anyways, you go through like a boss gauntlet here, you fight like 4 or 5 dudes in a row, beat them up, drive them off, and then Faye comes out and he starts describing why he decided, oh, there were some kids that were about to get killed, like I mentioned.
Yeah, the brother and sister, yeah.
And they're running along like a, I don't know what you call it.
Catwalk?
Yeah.
I don't know. Just a hallway thing.
They're running down this path, and one of the, I think it's Vance or somebody, is like, hey, what you doing, kids? I'm gonna kill you.
Yeah, just so stoked.
And then Faye shows up, like, what are you doing? Like, why are you fighting? He's like, what is your reason for fighting? Like, why do you want to hurt people? Like, stop.
Vance's his response is kind of weird. He's kind of like, what the heck are you doing, man? Like, he doesn't get that, like, you're about to kill kids, and that's why I did this. But he just doesn't get why. It's like, hey, where did you come from, and what are you doing? Yeah, it's like he just hit him for stepping on ants. Like, what's your problem, dude? Yeah, it was weird.
And I think there was another Gebra pilot who said something similar to Saitan. Saitan was like, I'm not going to hurt these people, He's like, what are you talking about?
Right.
It's like they're direct quality.
They're so desensitized.
What are you even, what? I don't understand what you're talking about. What's the
Yeah,
problem?
it's so funny.
Because they just don't see land as human beings.
Yes.
So, anyways, the line from Faye here is he sort of like, talks about why he decided to fight. He says, I thought I didn't have a path I could take lay out before me. But like he said, that's just running away. Like he said in the box. Like he said, that's just running away. I must find my own path, right, Doc? If Bart wishes, I'll cooperate with you guys. That's what I can do now. But I think I'll find the path I should follow as I help others, like you. Moreover, I can't turn my back anymore on what such a terrible group of people are doing. So,
that's a good paragraph. Like, it very well lays out his motivations and what he's going to do and why he's doing it. And not that we need it to be this explicit, but in this case, it's very nice.
Sorry about that.
It's hard to read Faye and why he's so standoffish
focused.
in a lot of ways. And it helps a lot to like understand why he's making these decisions.
yeah, so it's like he was all afraid of what he could do, like his power.
Yeah.
He doesn't want to fight, but he also feels aimless. He feels like he doesn't have a path. He doesn't have anywhere to go. He doesn't know what to do with life.
Yeah.
So he's like, well, I don't know what it is, but I think I'll find it
If
I'm pursuing helping people.
right.
I think that you guys are better or good, much better than these other people, and the cruelty that they're exhibiting, the fact that they're willing to kill children.
Sure.
And, these people are terrible. So I will definitely justify helping you fight against them.
Yeah.
And along the path, if I can help people, I think think I'll find my purpose in that.
That makes sense.
I think it's a good place for him to reach at this point in the story.
So it may be just a thing, like a difference of perspective, like why are we the good guys and they're the bad guys? Like what's the difference between us? And this moment, where the guy's like trying to kill kids, it just solidifies it for him. Like, no, we are the good guys. I can fight on this team and be confident that we're doing the right thing. And yeah, I feel like that was what he was talking about before.
Yeah. Okay, so then they decide they're going to go into Glowczewski, the capital city of AGEX, to rescue Margie as a rescue attempt. Margie, who is Bart's cousin, who has the second half of the family Jasper. And so as you're entering the city, I really like this scene. It's one of my favorite scenes, where the large Gebler ship comes into the hangar. And it's like the camera's looking up as it descends down.
Is this the ship that we saw in Brooklyn Force?
Same
Okay,
ship.
I thought so.
Same ship.
Yeah, that's
So it comes in, and you have Shakan, who is the prime minister of AGEX, there to greet Ramses.
Yeah.
And Ramses comes walking out, and Shakan basically is praising him for like the great work that he's doing.
Clearly, Ramses is the better of the two.
Yeah,
he is
the highest ranking,
the higher
officer. Yeah. And he's basically praising him. But what I love is that Ramses says nothing to him. He walks straight past to Vanderpump, who is the previous commanding officer who had been, overseeing Gebler Force in that area before Ramses had arrived. He goes straight over and just berates him for embarrassing.
Yeah. He's just like, you said.
I am not paying attention to this land, despite being the prime minister. I don't care at all what you have to say. I'm going straight to you. Like, how dare you freaking embarrass me?
Right.
Just the total disregard of lands is so, it's just so consistent in how all the Gebler act.
Yeah.
And so he tries to kind of pick it up again, the prime minister, as Ramses is walking away.
He catches up. That was a nice touch.
I love that move, that camera move is just panning left.
Yeah.
And there's actually another element to this. It's a very dynamic shot in a lot of ways. But like Ramses is very determined. He's moving forward. And Shakan is like running up to catch up to him. But Niang, you see Niang, who is the other officer who's with Ramses, goes and speaks to Vanderpump for a second. She kind of stands behind, and she just goes up and approaches him. And you're not privy to what's said there. But then she kind of runs up and catches up in that same shot later on as they're talking. And then they all enter the hallway together. It's just a great shot, but there's a lot going on that you gotta read into. It's like Ramses berates this guy, walks away. Shakan's trying to catch up and talk to him, and Niang hangs behind for a minute, and then she runs up and catches up. And so, what's she doing? Like, what did she say to him? Who is she? And then
this whole cutscene here is just brilliant cinematography the whole way. And each time they transition to a new place, you got the black background that almost looks like a stage with a spotlight on it, It's great. And the camera's always doing something very interesting, whether it's a slow push in or just like tracking to the side while, following the character. It's just really cool. It might have actually been so cool that it was a touch distracting because you're having to read text, but you're missing the cool camera move while you're reading the text.
Right, that's true. Yeah, that can be tough with scenes that are like scripted in this way, right? Where there's there's movement and stuff, and it kind of corresponds with dialogue. But if you're not reading it fast enough, it's like it's going to get to the end, and they'll just hang there in the doorway until you finish the dialogue. But Ramses is approached by Shakan, who's like, "Hey, we're going to have this celebration of the founding of AGEX tomorrow. I'd really like you to be there for the ceremony." And he basically
kind of ridicules the founding. He's like, founding? Like, what was it before you founded it? Like, I just gave it to you.
Well, yeah, he says that later on the actual day.
Okay.
But in this particular shot, he just ignores all of that and asks about a report on he just doesn't care about land affairs at all.
Yeah.
He doesn't even pay attention to it.
That's so funny.
And so it really sets him up as like this hardcore, villainous Gebler officer.
Yeah.
But then immediately gives more dimension to him when they're riding the elevator. He says, "You aren't being rough with the
yes.
You aren't being rough with the prisoner, are you?" He said, "Oh, of course not. We know how you despise
we know you don't
such acts."
Yeah,
And he says, "Of course not. I know how you despise vulgar acts."
Vulgar acts. Yeah.
So, and then when Ramses actually goes in and speaks to Margie, he's very kind to her.
Yeah.
And he's very accommodating. And she's like totally avoiding the question about the Jasper. And talking about, oh, I love these cakes. And like,
Yeah.
no cakes like this.
Oh,
here.
the Nissan,
It's like
oh, it's a famous kind of cake,
kind of
yeah.
cake from Nissan.
Just, oh, you don't have any cooks here. I suppose they all died in the war? Like, question mark. Like,
yeah.
like kind of, sort of making fun of him a little bit, it seemed. Like, she's kind of mocking him a bit. Like, all your good cooks are gone. Like, what's the deal?
It's what this would usually play out like. The trope of how this would usually play out in a scene like this is you have the hardened, cruel officer military guy who, oh, are you gonna sit there and like mock me, like I'll show you, or like torture them, or like something like that to get in the fight. Ramses does not do that. She is, you know, playing dumb on purpose to avoid the question. Clearly, he knows that, but he's still kind to her.
Right.
He says, you know, I think I'll try to make arrangements to get you that cake next time, if possible.
I think Shakan even mentioned that because Shakan's got a little spy cam.
Yeah, I love that again.
And you don't know that it's but it shifts.
Yeah,
and
so
then
you have the initial shot where they're walking, but then it changes to an angle like this, and you hear the sound of it.
Yeah.
And then they have the whole scene, and then it pulls out of the camera into the
very well done
room
Yeah.
where they're observing this, and then Shakan starts like steaming behind Ramses' back. It's just so
And
brilliant.
Shakan's like, wow, you know, he actually is pretty good with, you know,
With the ladies.
kids or whatever. It was really funny.
Well, he says in particular, he got more out of her than we did.
There you go. Yeah, that's it.
And it's because he was kind to her, right?
Right.
Probably very,
Probably, yeah.
coarse and you know, demanding.
Yeah.
So just really great scene, and it shows, like, it gives you the first taste, I feel, of why the way villains are handled in this game, I think, are better than any RPG I've ever played. Like, they're not tropey. They each have individual motivations and character arcs themselves. They have fears. They have barriers in their way of them reaching their goals. They're treated just like a protagonist character arc usually is treated in story.
Sure. Yeah, that's
usually the protagonists have arcs, and the villain is the conflict, and is always a step ahead of them. Is always, you know, something that they're pursuing, but you never see their anxieties. You never see their fears or struggles or the faults in their personality.
And often, if you do, it's because the villain is in the process of becoming a good guy.
Yes.
Like in the new Star Wars movie.
Right. Yeah, it's like an anti-thing.
Yeah,
but in this case, they're still villains. They're still bad guys.
Yeah.
But there's just more dimension to them. And I love how that's handled, and I love how they are always against each other too. It's like the villains are not united. They all are vying for power in their own way. You kind of see that with Shakan, like the fact that Gebler now know about the Fatima treasure.
Right.
He's really upset about that.
Yes, and he's like, who leaked that information? Yeah. That's good because that shows that the evil forces are not united.
Yes.
Shakan is trying to gain power over Gebler in his own kind of way.
Right.
And they're not sharing info, they're not, even though Ramses may be this powerful figure, people are working to subvert him underneath him, and he's the villain, right? And in most villainy type things with, I don't know, like take Darth Vader or the Emperor, you wouldn't, anyone is just, oh yes, my liege, in front of them, but behind them they may talk bad, I suppose, but nobody, it seemed to me, was working to subvert the Emperor's will within the Empire. It didn't seem that way. I know people who know Star Wars really well probably know some expanded universe stuff. But generally, in a typical story with a typical bad guy, everyone's so afraid that whatever you want, they'll do it all, right? People are rarely doing their own behind-the-scenes work, but they're showing that here, which is typically how things run.
Yeah.
It's not always like a cohesive group that's so evil, right? It's like a bunch of different people with their own ideas.
Yeah. And it's just really, really,
You know,
one of the best parts of the game.
to the point about Ramses being kind to this girl, there is a story. There's a woman. She knew Hitler very well. She was a little kid, and he used to come to her. They used to go to like a cabin in the course, and like he was so kind, he was really good to kids, he loved to play and all that stuff. And this is Hitler we're talking about, and you won't find stories like that basically anywhere. But the idea that somebody super evil can't also be really like
Have good traits.
polite or have some traits or something that's like that. It's not just 100% Satan, you know.
Yes.
Just 100%.
Yeah.
Yes, but that of course go on to become the worst known people that you can think of. But that's just not how people tend to be. But even the fact that like Hitler like loved his wife or whatever, Eva Braun, I think. Like it's just weird to imagine that. And any movie made about him would not show that part of him. But that was probably the biggest part
It's like
of his whole
it's
life.
like
was
a
his wife.
hard thing for people, I think, generally to really wrap their head around. It's just so much easier to imagine that they are the embodiment of evil.
Sure.
Only someone who is the embodiment of evil is capable of doing that, right?
Exactly.
It's almost a
that way it
comforting
absolves you from
Yes.
thinking that you could ever do something that
It's a
bad.
comforting thought because when you start to see that that's not the case, like that this person had all these good traits and in a lot of ways was very human
Mm.
in other ways, and it's just this particular fixation, this radicalization that took in this form
Yeah.
that went so far.
Coupled with like psychotic
Yes,
tendencies.
and that led to a
Wrong.
justification
Right.
of the evil, but did not believe they were doing something
Exactly.
evil.
Exactly.
That's harder to accept because it's
Yeah.
scary.
Yeah. I totally
And-
agree.
And
It
so
is
like,
scary.
and so anyways, that's you know, this is something I was talking about with somebody who was giving me some feedback on the story that I'm writing too. It's like, I want to hate your villains more. I want them to be cooler. I want them to be worse so that I can hate them more. It's like, well,
In some ways, that depends on the age group you're writing to.
this story, Xenogears in particular,
Yeah.
for me was such an inspiration for how I wanted to
Mm.
handle villains.
Yeah.
Because I love that you have that human side of them.
Yeah.
And that they're not always just the embodiment of evil. They do
Right.
believe completely that what
And they're
doing is
always
the right
just
thing.
rubbing
Right.
their hands together.
Because that's
Yeah.
that's the reality of it.
That is the
in
reality.
many cases.
It's the uncomfortable reality of it. Yeah.
So, anyway,
Seeing him good with kids, it just reminds me of that.
yes, great introduction to Ramses. So we're gonna probably skip through a little bit of like all the stuff you can do about it, just to get through it.
Yeah.
Kind of cut to the important part.
I do want to say that the city is so cool.
It's
There
great.
is so much to do.
It's great.
And every room is fleshed out, and every, like the restaurants and the little mini
Yeah.
things that you can do, and the carnival, and the different sections, and it's so well done.
Yeah.
And you really, playing this game, you really ought to do yourself a favor and spend a ton of time in this city.
Everything.
Go everywhere and look everywhere, because there's so much here, and it's so freaking cool. This might be my favorite city of any JRPG.
Really?
It feels so alive and real and interactive, and it's just every corner of the city is like used in a way that maybe wasn't efficient, given that they couldn't finish the game. But it is just beautiful. I really appreciate this kind of stuff in an RPG.
Yeah, they got like an ethos headquarters there where they're fixing up gears.
Yeah.
They've got like a restaurant with like a little chest inside of a water tank that you can get
Yes.
if you know where to go with Bart as he's going through the waterway. You can get that gold nugget that's in there.
Oh, interesting.
There's a lot
That
of
fish
little
tank looks
things.
sweet, by the way.
Yeah.
That was so cool, man. Such a nice stuff.
You play hide and seek with kids.
Yep.
But that's kind of part of the required quest, I guess.
Yeah, that's
But there's people with great dialogue, like an old guy who believes his son he's kind of senile, but he believes his son is honorably fighting in the
Mhm.
war, and you go talk to his wife, and that's not necessarily the case. There's so much
Yeah.
personality to the NPCs. There's merchants that are selling their calling you over.
Yes.
Please
Like,
buy.
Bill Bananas for my bananas or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so funny.
It's really good. It's a wonderful,
Yeah, it's
wonderful city.
And mini
Lots
games in
of
the
urban
carnival.
food.
I do have to point this out.
There are a couple of things there that I
Yeah.
want to
Well, you grabbed the balloon at the carnival, and that is the coolest thing. Where when
Yeah.
you leave that
Oh,
region,
and then it
the
floats
balloon floats away,
on
and
the,
it is
on the
so
world
cool.
map.
Yeah,
Yeah, it floats away.
and you just watch it go, and it is.
Love
It was almost mind blowing because at first I was like, "What is that?" Like, you don't expect that in a PS1 JRPG.
Yeah, love that.
And it's like, that's my purple balloon. That is the coolest thing ever. I absolutely loved it.
Yeah, it was great. That's the kind of charm that was so unique to the '90s SquareSoft era.
Yeah.
Games like that,
Yes.
they would do.
Yeah.
That it just like, man, just the design
endearing.
philosophy
It just
of the
makes you
time.
smile.
I loved Square back then.
Yes.
They
Oh,
were so
yeah.
good at those little charming touches.
Absolutely.
Phenomenal stuff.
And that carnival area did remind me a lot of Chrono Trigger, actually.
Yeah.
The Millennial Fair.
Another possible tie to when it might have been.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, very cool.
Also, I noticed you can buy these iced cakes or these hot cakes that will make you gain or lose weight depending on what you eat. Another kind of just, I talked about weight and like the fact
And
that
how it's not a
you
thing.
haven't buried anything,
Well,
but
maybe it could have
it's
been.
just a little
Yeah.
thing or a little interaction that can just kind of be fun. This city is full of that stuff.
It is so
Do everything you can, it's quick.
Yeah.
But we need to kind of cut to the important bits. You're looking for Wayland Castle. You find out that there's these waterways
Yeah.
and that they're holding a tournament and as part of the celebration of the founding of AGEX. So the plan ends up being, okay, Faye is going to enter that tournament. By the way, Saitan pushes Faye to fight in the tournament while he himself is perfectly capable of doing so. He's like a kung fu master himself.
It's true. It's
Like,
true.
You
Yeah.
watch his moves, like the dude is a
This is
legit
so
kung
funny.
fu artist.
I'm so used to Satan doing what he does that I didn't even think of that.
Yeah.
I didn't even think that he could have been.
There's no reason why he couldn't have volunteered to be the part of the plan that's the distraction.
I mean, freaking Dan is fighting in this tournament.
We'll talk about that a lot.
Satan could very well have entered this tournament.
Well-
And it's not like we even did some spectacular thing that drew everyone's attention. It was
Yeah.
we were just there, and someone else would have
It's
been there.
meant to create a spectacle
Yeah.
so that more guards' eyes would be on the tournament
Right.
and away from bars who's trying to sneak in.
Yeah.
That's the whole plan. It all
Yes.
is done. But he pushes Faye
Yes.
to be the one to fight in the tournament. Although Faye said over and over and over again, I hate
don't wanna
fighting.
fight.
I hate fighting.
Yeah.
I hate fighting. I don't want to fight. And Saitan's perfectly capable of fighting in this tournament, and he still
Interesting.
pushes Faye.
Very interesting.
Faye, he really wants Faye to fight.
By the way, in 90s JRPGs, the concept of a tournament, just the coolest
Yeah.
idea ever. Just
Yeah.
whether it's the Hunt in FF9
Yep.
or just any strong. I think sword. No, second story. What was that one called? Ocean Star Ocean. Second story.
Yeah.
They got the big competition, and I just love it. It's kind of it's campy a little bit. It's like very stereotypical.
Battle arena,
But I freaking yes, exactly. But I love it. Like it should always be done because it's so cool. Dragon Quest XI did it.
Yep.
Like it's just everyone does it. But
Oh,
you
yeah, that's
can't
right.
pass up the
Well,
opportunity
that's
to
where
do it.
Sylvain.
That's where we first meet.
Yeah, that kind of comes into it. Yeah, it's a trope that we love it. We want. Right? There are certain tropes. The word trope can kind of be seen as a negative connotation sometimes.
Yeah.
Oh, that's tropey. It's too repetitive.
Some tropes are
Some tropes are
great.
great.
Yeah.
World maps. I want that trope forever.
Yes,
You don't
me
see it
too.
very often anymore. I just think it should come back and should always be there.
Yes.
Tournaments.
Tournaments.
Tournament sequence.
And a big tournament where it's like everyone's doing it, like Paper Mario does it, like they all did it. And the cool thing about FF9 is like with the Hunt, because they had Trino and the Hunt, right?
Yeah.
Those are their big tournaments, but it's like they kind of did a different take on it, and
Mhm.
that's cool. But as long as you have a tournament,
Yeah.
you just gotta have it.
Just have it
Sorry,
there
you
somewhere.
have to.
Do a spin on it, but have it.
Yeah, because it's so fun.
Can't
It's
be
so fun.
JRPG.
No.
Okay, so, anyways, that's the plan. So you go sign up as, I love the names, the options for the names you can choose. You can be like the dragon slaying slagger.
Yeah.
Or like the ponytailed boxer.
Boxer. I wondered about the wandering boxer. That's what I picked. If wandering meant drunken, because drunken boxing is in Legend of Drunken Master. Drunken boxing was Jackie Chan style, and he was Wong Fei Hung. And I was like,
Yeah.
this would solidify it. But I looked up the Japanese; it really is just wandering. It's not drunken. So
That would be interesting.
that they should have done that. I think that's a missed opportunity for them.
So anyways, you go sign up, and, but there is one NPC, actually a couple of NPCs, that I want to look at the dialogue real quick.
Okay.
There's one guy you talk to up near where you can get into the balloon. Right?
Oh, yeah.
And there's that balloon, and it's up in that area.
Oh, the guy who kind of did another old man telling.
I don't know if he's old, but he's
You're
sitting
right, but he says this is according to my research.
He's been doing research
As if,
on
yeah.
the sky people.
Yes.
You
The
remember the
yes,
UFO
if we've
thing
seen
you
a
saw
UFO.
floating.
That's right.
So you talk to him, he asks, have you ever seen a flying saucer? And you remember back, oh yeah, I did see that in the desert back in when I was chasing after Saitan in the desert. And if you say yes to him, he says, yes, that is the country of the great ancients. They came from a star further than heaven and created us. They ruled this land as gods. But man gained knowledge and strife erupted everywhere. The ruins are proof of those struggles. The descendants of the gods fled this land of conflict, making their place in the sky. It was a peaceful place, with a civilization far more advanced than ours. Are you listening? They're still alive. Have you noticed that sometimes people disappear? They're taken by what I call sky people. They're trained as soldiers to rule over Earth. The time is near. God's army will appear out of nowhere. Haven't you heard? Don't defy them. You can't win. They will make paradise on earth again. That's what my research has shown about the sky people and the saucer.
That's fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
The only thing that's missing is him at the end saying, "Oh, but don't listen to me. I'm just an old man."
Yeah,
that's all it's missing. Because there are many times when they do this, and it's always like the drum guy at the beginning of the game, where he's like, I've always wanted to say that."
So starting to tie or bringing to clear focus Diablo a little bit more, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like these people interfering with like the surface dwelling conflict.
Sure, yeah.
They're looking for the special gear.
They're trying to establish paradise. Yeah.
Yeah. They see themselves as higher than the
Mm-hmm.
lambs below, right?
Yeah.
Just some little foreshadowing there.
Of course. This seems to be quite a bit, actually. It's almost like too specific, but I don't know what he's referring to, so I just know
That's the fascinating
put it in my
thing.
head.
It is the fascinating thing
Yeah.
about my second playthrough.
Yeah.
I look at that and I go, holy crap, that's so overt.
Yeah, but I see it too, and I see that it's overt for some things, but I don't know what it's
quite put it together.
So I can just take a look at it. Okay, there's sky people who have got people, and they're trying to make paradise. Like, okay, I kind of connected those pieces more or less with some of the previous stuff.
Yeah.
But like, I still don't know who they are and what they're doing and what they want and why and how it's going to happen. I still know nothing about it, you know?
I'm almost convinced now that this game requires at least 2 players.
Yeah.
If you really want to get the fullness of its brilliance, you have to know what he's talking about and come back and see the plants and go, oh my god, it's all coming together, man. It's great. It's freaking awesome. So if you're playing this for the first time, start a file and play it again when it's done. I'm telling you, if you look at it really differently the second time. All right. So then I went in and played the balloon mini game. I don't know yeah, but when you come back out, there's a Lahan villager who, if you talk to him in Lahan, he was talking about, I'm going to go to Ave to like work.
Oh,
or if it's not that, I think it's his wife and kid are at home. And she talked about how her husband just always focuses on work and he's never at home. And anyways, there's an NPC, I'll put it on the screen, I took footage of this. He comes and asks you how his wife and daughter are doing. And I thought that this was really deliberate timing, because Faye had just decided to accept that he's going to try to help people and he's going to fight, and he just let loose a little bit by playing a little mini game in the little carnival, and he's starting to kind of like come out of himself, and then someone from Lahan just approaches him, and the trauma is all kind of just like reinforced.
Yeah. Oh, counter.
Xenogears loves to do this.
Everything's so like intentional.
Just when you start to think like things are going to be good and it's going in a good direction, it has this way of just like stabbing you in the heart.
Wow. That's amazing though. That's well done.
And yeah, I just thought that was, it's not just like this little interaction that's like, you know, fun or just like a little thing. I feel like that's really intentional. Because I don't think you see this otherwise. I don't think this guy like runs up and talks to you unless you go play that movie.
I don't
recall about that,
but yeah.
But that's just how it played out for me. It just felt very like intentional. But anyways, so let's talk about the tournament part of it first before we talk about the Bart sneaking ability. So you go there, you enter the tournament, and you go in there, and you can go talk to like the other participants.
Yeah.
Like the combatants in the tournament.
They're a bunch of clowns, but these don't appear to be very serious people.
Well, there's Big Joe, who we saw back in
Yes.
Dazzle, right?
Yeah, he's funny.
He's got like a bunch of fans.
He
He's
loves his
like a fan
fans.
favorite.
Yeah.
Of course, there's Dan, who I want to talk about more in a minute,
Yeah.
because I have a real big problem with this. But then there's this cloak figure with a mask, who knows
our name. It says Faye. Yeah,
knows
it says our
Faye's
name.
name, but Faye didn't give his name because he entered as the
A fake name.
dragon slaying slacker or whatever.
Yeah, it's like, yeah.
He knew his name.
The hash.
Now, I'm not, actually, it's not a spoiler, so this is fine. If you remember talking to the maid in Faye's house, which is Chief Lee's house, back in London.
Yes, I remember. That was the first person you talked to.
She talks about you got brought here
Right.
3 years ago.
By someone wearing a cloak. Yeah, you see kind
You
of
see the blue cloak.
I don't see the face, but is this?
It's the same guy.
Oh, no way.
If you look at his cloak, it's the same guy.
Okay.
This is the guy who brought Faye back to you.
Wow.
Brought Faye to Rome.
Like 3 years ago. Wow.
So, this mystery man, who ends up being the last guy you fight in the tournament, it's like the final round, and you can't even hit him. Like he's just going doop, 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 like that. I mean, like it's very anime style. Like, you can't even hit him. I'm so strong, I'm so bad.
Nice.
He's got his hand on his back. But, just kind of like testing your strength. No, you're not strong enough. This isn't good. You know, all these mysterious kind of condescending comments about Faye's power. Like, there's so many people concerned with Faye's power.
Yeah.
It's like and Graf and this guy, right?
And Bart.
Bart. So, anyways, if I could see this easily being missed because it's been quite a while since you saw that cutscene. You might not have seen it all. You might not have talked to him. But if you did, you saw the guy's cloak, and you see this guy's cloak. They are the same person. So this is the guy that brought Faye back there. And he knows Faye's name.
Yeah.
So, but Dan, let's talk about Dan here. Dan entered this tournament. I hate this.
He isn't even surprised to see us. It's like he expected us to be there. We show up and he's like, "I'm gonna revenge on you," and it's like, we're like, Dan, what are you doing? And he's just like, "You kill him." But it's like he's not surprised. It's like he knew we would be there, and he's there to kill him.
Yes.
Kind of weird.
Now, it's very silly because Dan obviously cannot fight.
He's a kid.
He's a kid.
Yes.
I don't understand why they would let this kid fight in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Now, some people will probably try to point out, oh, but like right now there's a war going on. That some of the entities you mentioned, many of like the, more interesting combatants are off in the war. They're off
Yes.
being soldiers and not fighting.
Yeah.
So this year's isn't going to be as special
That's why
as
they're all clowns.
a lot of other years are.
Right.
Still, who is letting some like 10-year-old kid in
He's
here
10.
to fight men? I don't like that. I also don't like the fact that, well, I mean, it's even implied that Dan can't fight anyways because you fight him like several rounds in. Dan wouldn't have made it far enough into the tournament to have fought Faye unless he was his first.
Yeah.
They were paired in the first
Yeah,
round.
which probably shouldn't happen. Yeah.
If they'd been paired in the first round, maybe it would have been like, okay, whatever. But it is implied that Dan, unless he got like a
bunch of
four-round
people.
bye, which makes no sense, he fought and beat people up to this point.
Yeah,
But he can't even do damage to Faye.
yeah.
Like he's fighting Faye and he's like getting zero. There's this part, at some point he like jumps on it because, okay, there's two patches here. You have a fight ban, and I don't remember what the reward for that fight is. If you fight Dan, if you legitimately do it. But if you don't fight him, you choose to defend, it'll go for certain amount of rounds, and then he'll be like, oh, screw you, you're not even gonna fight me back, like, I'm gonna hold off this duel for later,
Ooh,
and
come
hold
on.
to this, and
Stay
hold
still.
on to remind you of the terrible thing, and he throws his sister's wedding dress at Faye. So you get the wedding dress as the reward if you choose not to fight him defend. So that's what I did on the playthrough. But there's a shot where I guess Dan is doing a death blow. And he like jumps on it and he's just beating his face into the ground. Bam, bam, how dare you dare and like blow you away. I don't know if you saw it, maybe you chose to fight him and you didn't want to fight. I didn't, and so like the whole thing doesn't make sense. And I was thinking about this, and I was just like, this is really ineffective. Like Dan is not a likable character. Like he wasn't endearing in the first place.
Yeah, he's not.
The player, it's implied that Faye cares about Dan.
Yeah.
But they never, I don't think they did a good job of making the player care about Dan. And so when Dan's around, Dan's just an annoying butthole.
Yeah, he is.
And I just wanted to go away. So the combination of that and the fact that it's very unconvincing that this little kid got into this tournament, fought this far, when he has no fighting skills, aside from a Kamehameha blast. And who knows how he got that? That's silly. The whole thing is so silly and dumb that it really ruins the moment, which is supposed to remind Faye again of the trauma of life.
Exactly, because you killed this kid's family, and now
Yes.
you have to beat him up just to create a distraction because you're
Yes.
doing more important things.
Yes.
Right? And that's what you're supposed to feel. So it doesn't make sense to have the silliness and the comedic stuff
It ruins.
on top of like you're supposed to really feel bad
Yes.
about doing this.
Yes.
But you have to fight him. Oh, this sucks. This is stupid. It's like the Hunger Games.
Here's my suggestion. What if it wasn't Dan that survived the massacre at Normandy? What if it was Timothy?
But
Faye's
Dan got
best
shot
friend.
instead.
Dan died, and Alice died, and Timothy, who was legitimately Faye's best friend,
Yeah. Yeah.
turns on him and wants revenge. And Timothy comes after him.
That would make more sense in this whole tournament regard.
That I would have taken a lot more seriously. Also, this is something I forgot to mention in the development history section in the first episode. There was an earlier draft of the game where Alice survives, and she kind of pursues Faye throughout the game. They ended up cutting that because they felt like it complicated a romance that will come later in the game for Faye. They were like, I don't want to like.
Sure. They created
It's
triangles.
just, I don't want to create this kind of love triangle.
Yeah.
But what if it wasn't even that? What if it was Alice, who Timothy and Dan had died, and Alice wanted to revenge on her, and she had been in love with him before? Like, either one of those scenarios,
but don't have her like him.
yeah, hate him instead. I think either one of those scenarios would have been much more interesting and would have elicited the right drama for the
Yes,
scene
absolutely.
than Dan.
Then Dan. Dan is just kind of a joke character. It's like you just can't take him seriously. He's not. Yeah.
I don't like him.
He's not interesting. Yeah.
So I really didn't like him.
Yeah.
But anyway,
You're right. Very small things could have made a big difference.
I think it would have really helped if they had just changed it to Timothy. Anyways,
Yeah, I agree with you.
so that's that. Now we go into Bart, who's sneaking through the waterways. There's a lot of treasure and stuff you can pick. And what I really like about the scene is that it like cuts back and forth. It's like a timer, so you have a certain amount of time as Bart.
Yeah,
And like if you don't make part of it, it's like it cuts back, and so
Right.
So it has to say like win. but
What do we
try
got
to move
next?
too fast.
yes, that's right.
Because you're trying to buy time for Bart. So they kind of tie that into the gameplay. Where it's like you're trying to, as fast as you can, swim through the treasure and like get into the castle, but it keeps cutting back in the middle of you doing that to Faye fighting. It's like you can get to the point where if you don't get through fast enough, the guard activity in the castle when you're running around with Bart is higher when the tournament's over than it is if the tournament's still going on. And I liked how they did that. That was really cool. But there's not really much to talk about. You're kind of sneaking through. You can fight guards or run past them and avoid them. I really like how you can go into doors and then like as you're exiting, you can just like open the door and like peek out and see if there's a guard coming. And if they're hard, you can just wait for them to pass and you can go out.
Dude, I tried so hard to just avoid all the guards. It is impossible. It is way too hard. It is way too hard. Especially because the camera, I love the camera, I love the way the game looks.
It's
but
hard to see.
when you're in that castle and you're trying to look around corners, there's stuff in your way all over, especially in that courtyard. It is really hard to get like a good angle and like look around. Especially like right when you first get there, I'm like, sick. Like, but you can't see anything because you came up. And there's just a courtyard everywhere, and it's like, hey, there's a guard here, and I think they're here, and as soon as I exit, I walk right into them.
Yeah. So, I really like the sequence. The sequence is great.
Yeah, that sequence is awesome. Very cool. And you can go to the kitchen, and the coolest thing about it is there's stuff there. You can just grab all the food.
Yep.
Like you can take it, and then there's I can't remember what else. Yeah, the turkey, and you can just like have it. And there's a few other parts throughout the game. I can't remember specifics, but when there are things present in a place, sometimes you can just grab it.
Yep.
And I think that's nice because you always want to do that in RPGs, but usually you can't.
Yeah. It's great stuff.
Yeah.
A nice little stuff, mechanics worked in, just a fun sequence.
Yeah, very fun. Love it.
But then you get deeper into the castle, you find where Margie's at, and you're like, all right, we're getting out of here. And that's where the save point is at, and we'll be chosen to play up to. But
Yes.
the last note here is that she grabs what looks like a little pink stuffed animal. Like, oh, I really like
Yes.
this.
Yes. I do remember that.
This is a character named Choo Choo.
Nice.
The birth of Choo Choo. And,
Oh, wait a second. Is Choo Choo in the other Xeno games?
no.
Oh,
But there is a similar character type.
I think
which
I
is the
know.
Nopon people.
Yes.
In like Xenoblade.
Xenoblade, yeah. Okay.
Whether it's Ricky in Xenoblade Chronicles or Tatsu in Xenoblade Chronicles
Mm.
X. There's a bunch of Nopon in Xenoblade 2.
They're Moogle.
It's the Moogle.
Yeah.
But it's the most annoying version of that character in any game I've ever played.
Wow.
I look forward to this Choo Choo a lot.
Wow.
So yeah, Choo Choo was. I looked this up. Choo Choo apparently disguises itself as a stuffed animal. So Margie was dragging around the stuffed animal that you found like in the markets in Vladimir. It's Choo Choo. So we're gonna get more Choo Choo. A lot more Choo Choo. There's some really freaking like meme-worthy Choo Choo stuff in this game. And people who play will know exactly what I'm talking about. But I can't wait for you to see it. I'm really curious to see how it will land with you in certain very intense scenes where Choo Choo is there.
Okay. Well, so Choo Choo, I take it as a comedic relief.
Choo Choo sucks.
Jokester.
I hate Choo Choo.
All right.
But this is what Choo Choo enters the chat. And that's it for this week's podcast. Thank you guys for watching.
So we got.
Appreciate it. Okay, so the point that we're going to want to play.
Give me a second.
I don't want to describe, but there's a place. I hope people don't consider this spoilers. There's a place where Ellie and Faye kind of a little bit of a heart-to-heart about her getting out of the army. He kind of encourages her to try to get out of the army.
Mm-hmm.
And he gets into his gear, and he enters a cave, and there's a save point right there, and there's another, like, kind of gear standing there. That save point right there, that's the point where I put it. If I find out in an addendum how to put that better, I will do that. I'm going to say that instead. But thank you for watching. We'll see you again next week. Peace out.
Okay, never mind. YouTube does this thing now where, if you just don't interact for a while, it'd be like, hey, are you still there? And it's like, yeah, I'm just letting stuff kind of go.
Body what it needs to stay strong on the inside and resilient on the outside. Rise up, push your limits, go into the year ahead with power and grace.
Introducing Wendy's new hot and crispy fries. Preferred almost 2-to-1 over McDonald's. Try it today. Only at Wendy's.
Welcome back to the State of the Art podcast. My name is Mike.
My name's Casey.
This is our continuing Xenogears story analysis series. Thank you for joining us. Before we get started today, a little bit of housework on our end. We've been doing this weekly now for how many weeks straight? It's been four, 5. I guess by the time this goes, it'll be 6.
Oh, yeah.
But it's been going great. However, there have been a lot of people, I say a lot, I guess it feels like a lot to me, because anytime someone's like, oh man, what about this? It's like, I get all worried about it. people are asking about, well, what about the Final Fantasy retrospectives and the video essay type videos and that sort of thing? What happened to that? Well, the podcast audience has supported us far more than anyone else. So we are now making the podcast kind of the hero content in this moment, right, for them, because they showed up. Now, that being said, we do, and I am still working on that Final Fantasy retrospective series. I'm really working on the first episode right now. You can see, if you were here, Jason can see.
I can see it.
I'm in there composing.
Yeah.
I'm doing an orchestration of the prelude that I'm going to use in the introduction sequences when they do the title animations.
Oh yeah.
So it's going to play this little prelude that I'm creating of my own version of it. So anyways, that work is going on still. But the podcast is a lot of work, particularly for Xenogears. There's tons of research and a lot more editing and things like that going into it. So here's what I've decided to do. We're going to put up a new, I don't know what they call it, a goal, a stretch goal.
Stretch. That's just kind
It's called stretch goal on Kickstarter, but
Yeah.
like it's a similar
It's
concept.
just the next like milestone.
Next mile, I think milestone.
Yeah,
is what they call it. So the next milestone, I've set at 3,500 per month, and that's going to be again between the two, between the Subscribe Star and the Patreon.
Yeah.
When they both add up to that number, then we will hire an editor who will edit podcast episodes so that I can focus my time on those other types of videos, and you will start to see those more frequently.
Yeah.
It will not be weekly quite yet, but at least once a month you will have like a documentary style, like heavily edited video essay, scripted out, or like a retrospective or something of that nature once a month. So we're still working on those. They just are taking a little longer because this content is now more regular and it takes a lot of work to produce this stuff. So if you have enjoyed the podcast, if you have enjoyed any of our content and you'd like to see more of it, hit us up on Patreon or Subscribe Star. We hit that milestone, and we'll get an editor so that I can get back to making that stuff a lot more frequently. So, put that out there for you guys. Okay. On this episode, we played up to or I guess it was last time, we played up to the point where you get into
Yeah.
the castle.
Which is so funny because as soon as the very next few steps you take after the end of our playthrough last time,
Yes.
just some really big stuff happens. Like
Yes.
right away.
And that's why I stopped right there.
Yeah.
So we stopped right as soon as you enter the room where
With
Margaret,
Margaret, yeah.
and there's a save point in there. He said, stop there, don't play further. And we kind of picked a weird spot for the end of this one as well, because there's another really huge thing that comes right on the back of the head.
Yeah.
But we played up through Nissan or Nisan, or however you pronounce that. And
Dang,
then
man.
The beginning
What's
of
going
the
on?
sort of like coup.
I'm losing my stream, and I know if I don't interact, it's gonna cut it off.
They're
And
gonna take out Shakan. They're gonna distract certain
Force
forces.
to distract. Apparently, there's only
I don't want that
units
to happen.
for Ave, and one of them's like just tiny, and so they just need to distract one, and it sends the other one out, and then they're free to do whatever they want.
Yeah. So we'll get to that and what that whole plan entails, but that's the point we're played up to for this episode. I keep saying that I'm going to tell you guys in some addendum or something where the next one is going to, and I always forget to do that. But I have been pinning it as the pinned comment. So if you just go to the pinned comments, that's where I'm going to plan on telling people from now on, this is where you play up to next time. So if you want to know where to stop for next episode, just check the pinned comment, the very first comment in the comment section from us. Okay, so we grab Marguerite, and she grabs
Pink Dude,
Pink
which is
Dude?
awesome. They didn't know either.
I thought it was just
the stuff in.
stuff in. But she grabbed it. Anyways, we'll get into that a little more in a minute. But the door, Ramses and Niang are basically waiting for Bart there.
Yeah, they're right there.
And so, again, it's pretty interesting. I like the way they handle Ramses. He's like this seemingly kind of more noble guy. Like
Sure,
he's
yeah.
trying to tell them, like, listen,
Yeah.
we don't want to hurt
Well,
anyone.
you've shown that he's nice to kids.
Yeah.
He doesn't
What is this? Episode 6? Alright.
rules to get what he wants. He seems relatively principled.
Yes, principled is a good
Somewhat,
word.
yeah.
Principled more so than maybe.
Yeah. Principled in a way that like Anton Segura from No Country for Old Men is principled. Like he will shoot you in the face with principled.
Yeah.
In a weird way.
So he's principled. He
Okay.
tries to like dissuade.
Let me
Bart
see.
from
Is
doing
this video still
it. Bart says no way. So you end up having a fight there.
still processing? I don't know. I don't even know if I can.
First round is Bart and Ramses. This is kind of an interesting battle because it's the first time. I don't remember if it's the only time because it's been a while since I played the game. But it's at least the first time where you have like companion characters that cannot
Anyways.
be targeted and you cannot control. So like
But the
Miang is like
Yeah.
aiding Ramses and Margie is aiding Bart. But I can't control Margie's actions.
Yeah, that's true.
And I can't target
She just
Miang.
kind of heals you, right?
Yeah.
You know, there's also a ton of dialogue like during the battle.
Yes.
It's almost like every exchange of hits you have is like, okay, more words, more
Yeah.
talking. Okay, exchange a few more hits. It's just
I like it when games do that. When
I
they
do
do
too.
battles and then like they talk back and forth and there's kind of like it's almost like a duel, right? So it's like you
Yes.
have like an exchange and then like a reprieve for a second
Yes.
and they like talk to each other or like battle wits and then they go back.
that way you're not just watching a cutscene. You're
Yeah.
you're involved, you're engaged, and it's similar to in our last playthrough with Nier, how Grimoire Vice was always talking to us during battles, and we were having banter and discussions, and it was a good way of giving a little more exposition, a little more of what's going on in the story, without us having to just kind of boringly sit through a bunch of dialogue. It was pretty good.
Yeah.
I was also very pleasantly surprised. I thought for sure, based on the way that he was with, what's the very, not the very bad guy, the murderous coup plotter who
Raph?
who runs the desert.
Shakan?
Shakan, that guy. The way that Ramses was with Shakan is, it made me think Ramses was quite powerful, and that we didn't really stand a chance, right? So as soon as he caught us, I was like, great. This is one of those game moments where you can't win. You're gonna fight him. You can't win. He
Win in the
wins.
game, losing the cutscene.
Exactly, losing the cutscene, and then he takes it back, and our whole plan just failed. And I was pleasantly surprised that was not the case. this
Yeah,
time.
it's actually really cool the way this was done.
Yeah, I liked it a lot.
So after the first round, Faye arrives, or
yeah,
jumps in.
and he like drop kicks him in this interesting way that really takes Ramses off guard.
Oh yes, it's a
Yes.
move he recognizes, and this is where
It
we get some really good foreshadowing here, right? So
Yeah.
Ramses recognizes or believes that he recognizes Faye from somewhere.
Yeah.
And I kind of copied down. He's thinking. I think it's in parentheses, so I think he's thinking this in his mind.
Yeah,
He says he looks completely different, and there's no response. Is it just my imagination? But that technique was indeed his.
and then it. Well, I guess we'll go into what he's talking about later on, but yeah, he looks different. Oh, that was weird to me. That the way that he said he looks different. Because when we see flashbacks or throughout all of this, the imagination is telling me that it's Faye's character. It's just him going back, and it was like his younger self. That was kind of what I was thinking with what I was seeing. And there was that cutscene with
It flashes to where
Faye, his father,
Yes.
and there's that red-haired person didn't know who he was, and there's a weird thing going on here that almost seems to link Faye with that character,
Yeah.
because Ramses has kind of a flashback, like a flashback of some red-haired dude like doing these Faye moves, like kicking up and beating up
But
all
like
these people.
barehandedly destroying you.
Destroying gears with his bare hands. Yeah, something else, like crazy things.
Really powerful.
And so it's like Faye's. I mean, we're not
Yeah.
there yet.
Right.
But I guess we're doing some of the similar stuff.
Yeah, so not only that, I don't know if you caught this. This is my first time seeing this.
Yeah.
As it comes out of that flashback,
Uh,
and the camera kind of moves back into, because it kind of pulls back a little bit.
Yes.
It moves back in to like the position where it hangs for like the battles, And
Yeah.
for a second, that red-haired sprite flashes in front of Faye.
I did notice that. I didn't see it.
Let me show it to you just so you
Oh,
see
that's
it.
great.
What's more, the name Faye, where have I, and then there's a quick flash to white. And then you just see Faye. That's my child's name. And then it comes back in from white. And the camera moves after Ramses goes, oh, yeah, realizes, and then you see the red-haired
Wow.
guy
Right
flash
before we kick the crap out of
in
him.
front of Faye, and then Faye finishes him off.
That's crazy. So he forgot that he had a son? He forgot the name of his son?
Are you talking about Ramses?
Yes.
No.
It's weird.
I
No,
think- I think-
we're fighting for a long time. And he's like, where have I heard the word Faye before? Like, if your son is named Faye,
No,
you
no.
don't have to think.
I don't think that, I think he's remembering someone saying my child's name is Faye. Not that he himself had a child's name.
Oh my gosh.
So it's flashing to white.
Oh, that ruins this whole playthrough for me. I thought that's our dad. For the
You thought
this whole-
Ramses was
Yes.
his father?
Yes.
No.
He's got gray hair. He's old. He seems old.
Oh,
He's got
man.
gray hair, I don't know.
I got some
And
blues
this
here.
whole past,
They're
like,
not open
several
yet?
hours of
Come on.
playing, I was like, oh my gosh, man, this is our dad.
Sorry.
Oh my gosh. Wow, so how did, aside from you played this game before,
No.
how would you know, based on what we just saw, that he was
Okay.
listening to someone else?
This is something I want to bring up because it's just interesting to me how people can read something so different.
I am really literal. When I read things, I interpret it
Yeah.
very literally, and this happens to me a lot, is what I'm saying.
So, in our near playthrough, right, I made the assumption that the wolf shade was a fusion of the original owner of the dog and the dog's soul
okay.
together,
Sure.
and that in that scene where he dies and the
And
owner's
you
like
see the
talking to
owner
him,
there.
I interpreted that scene as being a separation in death of the human soul from the dog soul.
Okay.
Like, and based on what I understood about the world of Nier at the time, right? Many shades confused together into
Yes.
bestial forms.
Yeah.
So like every other beast form shade that we fought
Mhm.
was an amalgamation of human souls, but they were still human,
Right.
right? This particular instance, that dog is just a dog shade. A
Okay.
shade, or a dog that was turned into a shade, not a human turned into a shade that fused
Right.
with a dog. Sure. So that, I interpreted it that way, and there was someone in the comments being like, it's really obvious that it's not that. And it's like, but it isn't, because the scene is actually pretty vague, right? So it's just funny to me that that shot right there, as it flashes, like, I've never thought what you got out of that, but I can see why you did. But it's flashing to white, and my intuition, I guess, was just like, he's remembering a voice. He's remembering someone saying it, but they're not showing it because they want to give away who his father is. But you took that as he's remembering, or maybe had retrograde idea himself and
It
forgotten.
literally says, where have I heard that name before? My son's name is Faye, something like that.
Yeah.
How did you not, I don't know, it's interesting. Now, there is one thing that when he's talking to himself, it's in parentheses, and then when it flashes to white, there's no parentheses.
Yeah, so it's not thinking.
So it's not him thinking. I can see that now that I know to look for some reason for why that might not be him. Now I can see that maybe, okay, there's no parenthetics, okay. But, this has happened to me several times in this game already, where I'm thinking, oh, the guy told me not to go in the desert because I might die, but it's like, no, he told us that Satan would die, so we should go in the desert.
Yeah.
And I reread that again, and I misinterpreted. I read it wrong because he says to your friend, you let your friend go alone. Okay. All right. But I can't remember the others. But there have been several times where I have misinterpreted, very much so, the intention here. Who else out there misinterpreted what we just saw and thought that he was Faye's father? Even for a little bit. You have to admit, just for a little bit.
We'll see.
I don't know how old he is, but he has gray hair.
Ramses has
so-
gray hair, but don't worry. Like, I don't want you to feel like, oh shoot, like that's ruined for me. Ramses'
I can defend
connection,
myself.
Ramses' connection to Faye is still really a really big reveal, and it's
Okay.
still something that's really important to his character arc. Like, Ramses' feelings towards Faye are still really important.
Okay.
It's just that he's not in the
It's
game.
just she's not. I thought I had this whole game figured out.
Okay, so you beat him up and you start to, or the party. Oh, the weirdest part of this whole scene is like the escape plan.
Ah, and you see, I lost it. That's exactly what I was talking about. Hold on, let me set this up.
Again, it's pretty interesting. I like the way they handle Ramses. He's like this seemingly kind of more noble guy. Like
Sure,
he's
yeah.
trying to tell them, like, listen,
Yeah.
we don't want to hurt
Well,
anybody.
we've shown that he's nice to kids.
Yeah.
He doesn't break his own rules to get what he wants. He seems relatively principled.
Yes, principled
In
is a
some
good
way,
word.
yeah.
Principled more so than maybe.
Yeah. Principled in a way that, like, Anton Segura from No Country for Old Men is principled. Like, he will shoot you in the face with his principle.
Yeah.
In a weird way.
So he's principled. He tries to like dissuade Bart from doing this. Bart says no way. So you end up having a fight there with Ramses.
Yeah.
And first round is Bart and Ramses. This is kind of an interesting
Alright.
battle because
Where am I
it's
at?
the first time. I don't remember if it's the only time.
Where am
It's been a
I
while.
at?
It's at least the first time where you have like companion characters that cannot be targeted and you cannot control. So like,
But they're
Niang, Niang is like
Yeah.
aiding Ramses, and Margie is aiding Bart. But I can't control Margie's actions.
Yeah, that's true.
And I can't target
She just
Niang.
kind of feels you, right?
Yeah.
You know, there's also a ton of dialogue, like, during the battle.
Yes.
It's almost like every exchange of hits you have is like, okay, more words, more
Yeah.
talking, okay, exchange a few more hits. It's
I
just,
like it when games do that.
I
When
do
games do
too.
battles, and then like they talk back and forth, and there's kind of like almost like a duel, right? So it's like you
Yes.
have like an exchange, and then like a reprieve for a second,
Yeah.
and then like talk to each other, or like battle wits, and then they go back.
that way you're not just watching a cutscene.
Yeah.
You're involved, you're engaged, and it's similar to in our last playthrough with Nier, how Grimoire Vice was always talking to us during battles, and we were having banter and discussions, and it was a good way of giving a little more exposition, a little more of what's going on in the story, without us having to just kind of boringly sit through a bunch of dialogue. It was pretty good.
Yeah.
I was also very pleasantly surprised. I thought for sure, based on the way that he was with, what's the very, not the very bad guy, the murderous coup plotter who
Raph?
who runs the desert.
Shakan?
Shakan, that guy. The way that Ramses was with Shakan is, it made me think Ramses was quite powerful, and that we didn't really stand a chance, right? So as soon as he caught us, I was like, okay, this is one of those game moments where you can't win. You're gonna fight him, you can't win. He
Win in the
wins.
game, lose in the cutscene.
Exactly, losing the cutscene, and then he takes it back, and our whole plan just failed. And I was pleasantly surprised that was not the case. this
Yeah,
time.
it's actually really cool the way this goes down.
Yeah, I liked it a lot.
So after the first round, Faye arrives. Or
yeah,
jumps in.
and he like drop kicks him in this interesting way that really takes Ramses.
Oh yes, it's a
Yeah.
move he recognizes, and this is where
It's
we get some really good foreshadowing here, right? So
Yeah.
Ramses recognizes or believes that he recognizes Faye from somewhere.
yeah,
I kind of copied down. He's thinking. I think it's in parentheses. So I think he's thinking this in his mind.
yeah.
He says he looks completely different, and there's no response. Is it just my imagination? But that technique was indeed his.
And then, well, I guess we'll go into what he's talking about later on. But yeah, he looks different. Oh, that was weird to me. That the way that he said he looks different. Because when we see flashbacks or throughout all of this, the imagination is telling me that it's Faye's character, it's just him going back, and it was like his younger self. That was kind of what I was thinking with what I was seeing. And there was that cutscene with
Flashes to where
Faye, his father,
Yes.
and there's that red-haired person didn't know who he was, and there's a weird thing going on here that almost seems to link Faye with that character, because Ramses has kind of a flashback, like a flashback of some red-haired dude like doing these Faye moves, like kicking up and beating up
But
all
like
these people.
barehandedly destroying
Destroying gears with the bare hands. Yeah, something like crazy thing.
really powerful.
And so it's like Faye's. I mean, we're not
Yeah.
there yet,
Right.
but I guess we're doing some of the similar stuff.
Yeah, so not only that, I don't know if you caught this.
Mm.
This was my first time seeing this. As it comes out of that flashback, and the camera kind of moves back into, because it kind of pulls back a little bit.
Yes.
It moves back in to like the position where it hangs for like the battle. And
Yeah.
for a second, that red-haired sprite flashes in front of Faye.
I did notice that. I did see it.
Let me show it to you just so you
Oh,
see
that's
it.
great.
What's more, the name Faye. Where have I? And then there's a quick flash to white. And then you just see Faye. That's not a child's name. And then it comes back in from white. And the camera moves after Ramses goes, oh, it realizes, and then you see the red-haired
Wow.
guy
Right
flash
before we kick the crap out of
in
him.
front of Faye, and then Faye finishes him off.
That's crazy. So he forgot that he had a son. He forgot the name of his son.
Are you talking about Ramses?
Yes.
No.
It's weird. I
I
don't know.
think-
We're fighting for a long time. He's like, where have I heard the word Faye before? Like, if your son is named Faye,
No,
you
no.
don't have to think.
I don't think that, I think he's remembering someone saying my child's name is Faye. Not that he himself had a child.
Oh my gosh.
So it's flashing to white.
Oh, that ruins this whole playthrough for me. I thought that's our dad. But
You thought
this whole-
Ramses
Yes.
was his father?
Yes.
No.
He's got gray hair. He's old. He seems old. He's got gray hair. I don't know. And this whole past like several hours of playing, I was like, oh my god, this is our dad.
Sorry.
Oh my gosh. So how did, aside from you played this game before,
No.
how would you know based on what we just saw that he was
Okay.
listening to someone else?
This is something I want to bring up because it's just interesting to me how people can read something so different.
I am really literal. When I read things, I interpret it
Yeah.
very literally, and this happens to me a lot, is what I'm saying.
So, in
Alright.
our near playthrough, right?
And that's
I
gonna
made
be
the assumption that
the
wolf
end of this
Shimon
one.
was a
Sign
fusion
it.
of the original owner of the dog and the dog sold
okay.
together.
Sure.
And that in that scene where he dies and like the owner
And you
starts
see the
talking to
owner
him, I interpreted that scene as being a separation and death of the human soul from the dog soul.
Okay.
Like, and based on what I understood about the world of Nier at the time, right? Many shades confused together into
Yes.
bestial forms.
Yes.
So like every other beast form shade that we fought
Mhm.
was an amalgamation of human souls that they were still human.
Right.
Right? This particular
Right.
instance, that dog is just a dog shade. A shade, or a dog that was turned into a shade, not a human turned into a shade, but fused
Right.
with a dog. So that, I interpreted it that way, and there was someone in the comments being like, it's really obvious that it's not that. And it's like, but it isn't, because the scene is actually pretty big, right?
Mm.
So it's just funny to me that that shot right there, as it flashes, like, I've never thought what you got out of that, but I can see why you
But
did.
you know what?
But it's flashing white, and my intuition, I guess, was just like he's remembering a voice. He's remembering someone saying it, but they're not showing it because they don't want to give away who his father is. But you took that as he's remembering, or maybe had retrograde idea himself and
It
forgotten.
literally says, where have I heard that name before? My son's name is Faye, something like that.
Yeah.
How did you not, I don't know, it's interesting. Now, there is one thing that when he's talking to himself, it's in parentheses, and then when it flashes to white, there's no parentheses.
Yeah, so it's not thinking.
So it's
Yeah.
not him thinking. I can see that now that I know to look for some reason for why that might not be him. Now I can see that maybe, okay, there's no parenthetics, okay. But, that has happened to me several times in this game already. I'm thinking, oh, the guy told me not to go in the desert alone because I might die, but it's like, no, he told us that Satan would die, so we should go in the desert.
Yeah.
And I reread that again, and I misinterpreted. I read it wrong because he says to your friend, you let your friend go alone. Okay. But I can't remember the others. But there have been several times where I have misinterpreted, very much so, the intention here. Who else out there misinterpreted what we just saw and thought that he was Faye's father, even for a little bit? You have to admit, just for a little bit.
We'll see.
I don't know how old he is, but he has gray hair.
Ramses has
so.
gray hair, but don't worry. Like, I don't want you to feel like, oh, shoot, like that's ruined for me. Ramses' connection to Faye is still really a really big reveal, and it's still something that's really important to his character arc. Like, Ramses' feelings towards Faye are still really important.
Okay.
It's just that he's not his dad.
It's just she's not his dad. I thought I had this whole game figured out.
Okay, so you beat him up and you start to, or the party. Oh, the weirdest part of this whole scene is like the escape plan, right? When you like get him on his knees and it's like, okay, like now's our chance. And Margie steps up and a bunch of rats come like running in. I was like, I can't be seeing that one. I can't be right.
Yeah.
She like unleashes the castle's rats to like distract them so they can run away. Like, what the heck?
Very powerful. Oh my gosh.
All right, we'll just let that be.
I have to say, going back.
And yeah, man, still got some time. Give me a second.
This is just me being
Get some water. Take a bathroom break.
Real quick,
Well, I've been streaming for.
about Ren, like, there's some extra dialogue here that I think now that I'm reading it,